So maybe I'll go ahead and get started with a little bit of an intro here. Welcome to the DFW 2020 Solar Tour. My name is Larry. I'm a volunteer with the North Texas Renewable Energy Group. And with me this morning helping moderate is Dharma. And we'd like to thank our Terawatt sponsors, sponsor Dallas College, and thank all the homeowners who are going to be participating in the events later, Zoom virtual events later today. And thank everyone at NT-REG for putting on this event this year, the 11th year, although this is the first virtual time we've ever done this. I want to thank all those that are attending the Zoom call today and helping pursue clean energy and sustainability. This session is scheduled for 30 minutes. We encourage you to mute your mic when you're not talking. We are recording the session so that it could be available later for those that want it. If you have a question, we encourage you to use the chat box, which is down usually if you move your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, or depending on what device you're on, it might be on one of the sides or top, but just go into the chat box and enter your question in. And kind of the format for what we'll do today is I'm going to go through the presentation. Oh, we do have a cat in one of the videos. That's nice. It's always interesting to see, you know, all the side effects or visuals. And so anyway, I'll go through a brief version of the Solar 101. If you have questions, please enter them in the chat as we go. It shouldn't take but probably 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll have plenty of time for questions after that. All right, well, again, welcome to the Solar 101 today. The presentation objectives are really kind of threefold. One is to put solar energy in your vocabulary, to provide the basics of rooftop solar so that when you contact solar installation companies, you're a little bit more knowledgeable ahead of time, and to encourage you to talk up solar energy with your family and friends. Again, this is put on by the North Texas Renewable Energy Group. So encourage you to check them out. We will make a version of this presentation available on these websites so that you can go back later. There's lots of embedded links in here that you can use for references going forward. The North Texas Renewable Energy Group is a regional chapter of the Texas Solar Energy Society. And obviously, you know about our tour website because that's how you found us. So welcome to the event today. So what we're going to cover is basically a little bit of background on what solar photovoltaic, or PV for short, is. What are the benefits? How would it work on your house? How much would you need, and what are the considerations and trade-offs? What are some of the key cost elements and purchase options? And then most importantly, some consumer tips. We'll cover a few of them here, but we'll also provide some references for some additional consumer tips. So I want to start off with a little bit of a short 2-minute video by the Department of Energy that basically talks a little bit about the solar photovoltaic basics.
All right, we all know that the sun's energy creates heat and light, but it can also be converted to make electricity, and lots of it. One technology is called solar photovoltaics, or PV for short. You've probably seen PV panels around for years, but recent advancements have greatly improved their efficiency and electrical output. Enough energy from the sun hits the Earth every hour to power the planet for an entire year. Here's how it works. You see, sunlight is made up of tiny packets of energy called photons. These photons radiate out from the sun, and about 93 million miles later, they collide with a semiconductor on a solar panel here on Earth. It all happens at the speed of light. Take a closer look, and you can see the panel is made up of several individual cells, each with a positive and a negative layer, which create an electric field. It works something like a battery. So, the photons strike the cell, and their energy frees some electrons in the semiconductor material. The electrons create an electric current, which is harnessed by wires connected to the positive and negative sides of the cell. The electricity created is multiplied by the number of cells in each panel, and the number of panels in each solar array. Combined, a solar array can make a lot of electricity for your home or business. This rooftop solar array powers this home, and the array on top of this warehouse creates enough electricity for about 1,000 homes. Okay, there are some obvious advantages to solar PV technology. It produces clean energy, it has no emissions, no moving parts, it doesn't make any noise, and it doesn't need water or fossil fuels to produce power. And it can be located right where the power is needed, in the middle of nowhere, or it can be tied into the power grid. Solar PV is growing fast, and it can play a big role in America's clean energy economy, anywhere the sun shines.
Okay, just as a reminder, if you have any questions as we're going, please enter them in the chat, and we will then make sure we get those covered at the end of the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about solar PV benefits. Basically, it's an abundant local energy resource, and actually today's a nice sunny day, so we can take advantage of that. It can generate electricity locally, which means less energy waste, especially on hot summer days. As the temperature rises, the transmission lines are less efficient. And so if you can generate the electricity locally, that's better for the entire grid. It's a clean energy with no air, water, or noise pollution. And there's no water required to produce electricity. Traditional power plants generally use lots of water for cooling and steam generation. So none of that is required. And here in Texas, as we go through the cycles of drought and monsoon, those drought periods are a problem. And there's really no moving parts. So it's really, their panels are really low or no maintenance. So some other benefits, basically here in Texas, we use the most electricity when the sun is shining, and it's cost competitive for, sorry, something popped up on the screen. Cost competitive for rooftop solar, like we're talking about today. It's a great consumer choice to generate some of your own electricity, maybe hedge your long-term electricity cost, and it helps promote private investment in clean energy sources and local jobs. So we'll take a few minutes here to go through what a basic solar PV system would look like on your house. This example is, there's no battery required, although the battery technology is improving. This example basically is a batteryless grid-tied system. So if we look at the number one in the top section here, it says basically the solar panels turn the photon energy, as they described in the video, into electricity, the photon energy into electron energy. And basically that's DC current. And then that moves on to the inverter, which turns the DC current into alternating current, which is normally what we use in our homes. And those inverters can come in a variety of different types. This picture shows a string inverter where all the panels are connected to one inverter. There are micro inverters available, which is one inverter per panel, but basically they serve the same function. That electricity out of the inverter goes into your electric panel and basically goes to all the elements, loads in your house, just like the electricity that comes from the grid. Basically, the power that you generate locally is used first in your home, and then if there's not enough generated from solar, it can pull from the grid as well. And basically at nighttime, obviously the sun isn't shining, so you're pulling from the grid. If during the day you're you're generating more electricity that you're using, like at my home right now, we're using very little electricity, but my solar panels are ramping up as the sun's going up. So that excess electricity goes out my electric panel through the distribution grid, generally to my closest neighbor. It's basically the physics of the electron, and they go to the quickest load that they can get to. So a little bit about the production of the solar energy from the panels. Basically, you get the maximum power output when the module is perpendicular to the sun. So, as you vary the angle, you'll get less output from the panel, but basically you get the maximum output when it's perpendicular. So obviously when you mount a panel on your roof and the sun moves both through the time of day and all through the seasons of the year, you're not obviously always going to be perpendicular to the sun. But the nice thing is calculations have already been done that basically say you'll get the maximum annual energy production from your solar panel when they are south facing, tilted at the angle equal to your home's latitude. So here in North Texas, that's, let's say 32, 33 degrees, which is coincidentally the pitch of many of the roofs. So if you mount south facing with a tilt to that point, you'll get the best annual production. We look at solar panels are measured in terms of, they're rated in terms of watts. So 1 kilowatt is 1,000 watts, which basically takes about 3 to 4 panels. Basically here in North Texas, south facing, you would produce about 1,400 kilowatt hours a year for 1,000 watts of installed solar panels. A typical system might be 5 kilowatts or 17 to 20 panels, and they would produce about 7,000 kilowatt hours a year. So one of the key things we like to emphasize to people when they ask about, well, how big a system do I need? It's basically the first thing you need to do is always look at and estimate an annual usage. So in this example here and pretty much around North Texas, you'll see estimated or annual usages on homes anywhere from 10,000 or less kilowatt hours up to 30 or 40,000 kilowatt hours. Obviously, it depends on, you know, the size of your house, how many people you have, how energy efficient it is. So for all of those different sizes, we would look at and say, well, what would it take to offset 50% of that with local clean energy? And so the second column kind of describes what that would be. And then the number of the system size that you would need in terms of kilowatts and the approximate number of panels. So basically, you know, a small system might be 10 panels and a larger system maybe 40 or 50 panels. It's important to size the system. And I always like to say, think of it first to size the 50% of offset of your usage, and then ask the installers to say, why should you go smaller or bigger? And it gives them a challenge to go help you figure out what's the best size for your application. So cost is obviously a thing to understand. So I want to run through that 5 kilowatt system example, and we kind of talk about there's 5 key cost elements to consider. The first one is, you know, what's the total installed cost? And normally they price it in terms of dollars per watt or dollars per kilowatt. So in this example, I'm using $2.80 a watt. So that would be $14,000, 280 times 5,000. Many times there are utility incentives available, and the amount of that varies. But in this example, I'll use, it's a little less than $1 a watt, so be about $3,500. So your net cost after that utility incentive would be $10,500. There is currently a federal investment tax credit for this year at 26%. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That's also, when you file your taxes, you could get an additional, in this example, $2,730 back. So the final net cost would be $7,700. And if you divide that by the 5,000 watts, you get $1.55 a watt. So generally anything, I would say less than $1.70 a watt net is a pretty good number. And those, if you do the calculations on what that's equivalent to, it's about 5 cents a kilowatt hour. We do have a slide on that in the more detailed presentation that we'll make available on the website. And so you can look at that in a little bit more detail. There's different options to actually, you know, in terms of the economic of the panels, and you can purchase them outright, which is generally always going to be the best economical approach, but you can also finance it, lease it. Lease options may be available. You have to ask the solar companies that you're talking to because they don't offer all options. It may or may not. This federal investment tax credit has been up until this year had been 30%. It's now on a step down. So this year is 26, and then 22, and then in 2022, 10%. So I'll talk a little bit about some tips. You know, this is basically always it's a major purchase and or commitment if you lease them. We encourage you to get multiple bids. Make sure that if you're getting other things done at the same time, energy efficiency upgrades, that those are broken out and those details are separately identified for comparison purposes as well as for tax credit purposes. Always ask for and check references. Again, the best way to learn about solar is talk to friends and neighbors or attend the solar tour like you're doing today. That's a good way to find out lessons learned from those other folks. There is a company that does helps you obtain multiple quotes. It's called EnergySage.com. Was actually an early startup funded through seed money through the Department of Energy. So they're a good reference place to look as well. There's also some great resources available from the Solar Energy Industries Association. They have a residential consumer guide, 6-page document. It's really an easy read. And then they also have solar transaction disclosure form templates, which basically help you do comparisons between purchases, lease, and power purchase agreements. So just quickly wrap up, we encourage you to talk solar energy with your friends. Check out our website for more detailed version of this presentation. I actually have a version of this up on Plano Solar Advocates website. That's at planosolar.org under the presentation tab. We'll also get it added to the NT-Reg and the Solar Tour website. And again, that includes many of the links that were shown here. You can just click on them in the PDF and they'll take you to those reference sites. And so that's it.
Okay, the first question is from an attendee. He wants to know what's the basis for 50% of your load in deciding the sizing of your system?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in Texas, we don't have standardized net metering. Net metering would basically ensure that you get equal credit for what you buy from the utility and versus what you sell back to the grid. And so you have to, if you're in a deregulated part of the market, you have to kind of shop around to make sure you get credit back for that. And the closer you are to 100%, likely the more that you're going to export during the day. And so you want to make sure you get equal credit for that. So it's a function of net metering. And it's also, this is not intended to be a money-making operation where you generate, 50% more electricity than you use and hope to be able to make money every year from the company. It's basically to offset what you're pulling from the grid. I like to challenge the solar companies to say what they're going to try to sell you as much as they can. And so you need to kind of help temper that from what you think you really might need. And again, to get your annual estimated usage, basically you just take 12 months worth of kilowatt hours used from your bill and then add that up for 12 months.
So if I might add, it also depends on when you use energy and what electric plan you're on. So if you have like your electric vehicle you charge at night, then getting that extra 50% as solar doesn't really add as much value as if you burn all your electricity during the peak daytime hours.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is the ITC will, I guess it's more of a comment the way I interpreted it. The ITC will probably step down to 10% for commercial installations, but it'll go to 0 for residential. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, my understanding is that it's 10% for residential and commercial in 2022. And then in 2023, it stays 10% for commercial and goes to 0 for residential. And so I kind of think that's a bum deal, but we might have to do a push to our members of Congress to change that in the next year or two.
Okay, there was another, go ahead. Did someone have a comment? Okay, the next question was, are the solar companies offering any special credits or rebates for CO2 offsets that you're aware of?
Not specifically that I'm aware of. Again, I haven't researched that specifically. I definitely think that this is a great way to generate clean energy and not require more CO2 emissions. So I would encourage people to think of the benefits for all of us by generating less CO2 pollution. And we could have a whole separate conversation about that and be happy to do that as well.
So is it your recommendation that prospective rooftop homeowners ask for these kinds of special credits with the system suppliers?
You know, you could always ask. Again, I'm not real familiar with the mechanics of that and what would be involved. So that adds an extra layer of complexity. But you could always know that just for every kilowatt hour that you generate locally from your solar panels, that's less emissions going up into the atmosphere.
Thank you. The next one, I believe it's a comment that says, there's a brochure from the Texas Solar Energy Society on how to be solar savvy and 10 tips for solar consumers. That might be something worthwhile for
Yeah,
people.
definitely check out the.
Did you have that?
I didn't have the link to the Texas Solar Energy Society, but not that particular 10 tips. But yeah, there's good information on the state website as well as the North Texas Renewable Energy Group website.
And Larry, this is Rosa Owenstein. I think we also put the brochure on the DFW Solar Tour website.
Oh, great. Okay, good, good.
Thank you, Rosa. Okay, in the interest of time, the next one is if a structure is built to support the panels, such as a patio cover, is its cost included in the tax credit?
Let me apologize. My dogs are in the background barking, but that mechanism is my understanding is if the structure is built for the solar panels, even though it has multiple functions, then it can be used in the tax situation. I personally did that with my solar canopy, but I'm not a tax attorney. Please check with your tax experts.
As an extension to that question, this is from top of my head. What if I am to redo my breaker box and possibly go through some energy efficiency? Can those things be rolled into the package?
My understanding is energy efficiency cannot be. Those energy efficiency upgrades, they have a separate, or they even historically in the past had a separate tax thing. So that's why it's important if you get multiple things done at the same time that you get the solar specific things broken out for tax purposes. I do see the Jerry had added a comment here was related to the 50% usage. So if you do have batteries installed, which again, it's becoming much more cost competitive to do that, and you self-consume, basically anything excess that you generate during the day is stored in the battery so that you use it in the evening and at night. Yeah, then you really don't, at that point, you don't care that whether you get credit back from your electricity provider or retail energy provider, because you're going to use it at home. So that is an advantage. You know, now that the batteries are becoming more cost competitive, if you self-consume or self-store and then self-consume, then you don't have to worry about that net metering related aspect. So yeah, thanks for that question, Jerry.
Okay, here's the next one, and it's Encore specific, but I suppose it would apply across the board to other distribution companies too. The question is, does Encore delivery surcharge decrease proportionally to power you produce on your roof vs grid?
So, you know, the retail electric providers do, how they bill you and show you, it can be confusing. If your particular retail provider breaks out the surcharge, then for all the electricity you generate locally and consume locally, there won't be any delivery surcharge because Encore won't even know that you're you know, consuming that electricity because it's self-generated. Unfortunately, they don't give you a credit back when you send it back to the grid unless the retail electric provider includes that in the credit back on the sell back. So it's a little bit different. I use Green Mountain Energy, and so they basically just charge a cost per kilowatt hour, and they don't have any monthly fees. So their rates are a little bit higher, but but they do give full retail credit back. So for me, it's an easier calculation to do as well. And just as an example, my system offsets about 60% of my annual usage. And I do have an electric car as well that I charge.
Okay, Larry, I think that's the list of questions, and in the interest of time, we're approaching at 10 o'clock. I think we need to move on. Thanks for that excellent 101. And thanks everyone for coming on board, and hopefully you benefited from this presentation.
Yeah, we encourage you to continue following the rest of the day's events. The next event that's starting right now on a different Zoom call is there are two sessions going, one on the Westbrook House and the Schultz House. So please check those out, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you all.